My dear listeners, I am back on this Friday, the 13th of October 2023, to continue reading my book, Testimony of a Gambian Military Officer and Diplomat, by retired Lieutenant Colonel Samsudeen Sarr, former commander of the Gambian National Army. I'll be reading chapter 4 today. Now, if you could recall, in the closing paragraph of chapter 3, I wrote, approximately an hour later, the Presidential Guard surrendered to the Gambian National Army mutineers without any gunfire. After more than 30 years, the PPP government had fallen at the hands of the very military President Jawla had built. Anyway, given the swiftness and circumstances surrounding the whole incident, many observers still continue to believe the misconception that the American visitors had a direct or indirect hand in facilitating the success of the coup. Naturally, the presence of a United States naval ship in the Gambia and how the events unfolded on the day raised many questions. Because on the 21st of July 1994, around 5 p.m., the American battleship USS Lamar County, commanded by one Captain Bockhart, arrived at the port of Banjul the next morning, July 22nd, at approximately 7:30 a.m. The coup d'etat unfolded at Yundum Barracks. By 1 p.m., President Jawla, his family members, and his close associates, along with senior government officials, left the State House and boarded the U.S. battleship. The ship remained off-stream for 2 more days before finally dropping off Mr. Jawla and his entourage in the city of Dakar, Senegal, and went to their next unknown destination. In that strange-looking drama, the tenure of the PPP regime was ended. Swift, superficially uneventful, and a colossal surprise. Nevertheless, the subsequent revelations in this story or in this book will dispel all misconception about the coup, about the characters and the developments that followed to the ultimate end. Let's begin the reading of another relatively long chapter, chapter 4. Chapter 4, titled After the Surrender of the Presidential Guards. After the surrender of the Presidential Guards, the events of 22 July 1994 began to become clearer. Around 2 p.m., it was evident that President Jawla had sought refuge on the American battleship, while his guards at the State House had either surrendered or fled away. In the aftermath, I struggled to quell the torrent of uncontrollable thoughts flooding my mind. I was soon conveyed another intriguing piece of information at the radio station, that the Gambian National Army had effortlessly captured the main TSG barracks in Bakau under the command of Major Sute Banja. The major, accordingly, failed to report for work that morning. Hence, the seizure took place without any resistance or casualties. The development underscored the undeniable fact that there was no longer any willingness to fight or defend the government President Jawla. The absence of violence and the president's departure brought a sense of relief, yet it was accompanied by the disturbing uncertainty about what lay ahead. With the ousted government yet to be replaced, the question of the future governance loomed large and bewildering. So far, among the active participants in the morning's operation were the three officers I had encountered at the bridge: Captain Mamadi Sane, Lieutenant Haja Jane, and Second Lieutenant Edmond Samate. Additionally, I learned from soldiers at the radio station that Second Lieutenant Kending Singate and Second Lieutenant Keba Topper played pivotal roles in the operation, leading the infantry company that captured the TSG Fajara barracks. They used B Company, whose commander was Captain Mamadi Sane. I had wondered why the captain allowed the two second lieutenants to take over his company to attack the main TSG camp at Bakau, while he marched with C Company to attack Banjul. And where was Captain Mamadi Ba, the company commander of C Company, that seemed to have been taken over totally by one of his platoon commanders, Second Lieutenant Edmond Samate? There was a Gambian major at Yundum Barracks, the deputy battalion commander, Chris Jackson, whose role in the coup concerned me. Apart from Captain Ba, there were also 4 other captains at Yundum Barracks, namely Captain Patrick Davis, Captain Bernard Carlson, Captain Mamadi K.F. Bande, and Captain Demba Charen. I wanted to know the role these people played in the mutiny and everything that transpired with their men. Despite appearances, it was clear to me that Second Lieutenant Edmond Samate, the most junior officer in the Gambian National Army, held the main command and control over C Company bound for Banjul. Further reassurance came when I discovered that the Nigerians were unharmed. They said that chaos had briefly erupted at the camp during the early moments of the uprising, marked by a few shots fired into the air, and the arrest of officers who resisted joining the mutiny, but no casualties were reported. The morning's dual objectives of the army, the assault and seizure of the State House in Banjul and the takeover of the main TSG barracks in Bakau, were both accomplished without any resistance. Comparatively, one could argue that up to this point, the execution of the 1994 events seemed remarkably flawless when contrasted with the 1981 abortive coup. During the 1981 rebellion, civilian politician leadership characterized the Gambia Field Force operation. The initial act was the killing of senior officer Lamarana Bande, the armorer, at the depot, as he had declined to join their ranks. Still in contrast, Commander Banjang, who spearheaded the attack on the State House in Banjul, was, although initially successful, he met his death when the guards on duty returned fire after he fired at them. That marked a significant setback for the operation within the first hours of its commencement. Another setback that dealt a blow to the Gambia Field Force operation was the formidable challenge they encountered in trying to take over the main police headquarters in Banjul. The Inspector General of Police then, Mr. Limeby, had masterfully organized a resilient perimeter of resistance. Determined policemen and loyal Gambia Field Force guards stood firm and fought to the very end. They clung to their defensive positions until the decisive moment when the Senegalese soldiers entered the city, marking the final battle to reclaim the nation from the grasp of the rebels. In stark contrast, the Gambian National Army initiated their operation without civilian involvement. And up until the capture of the State House, not a single life was lost or injury sustained. Both the police and the TSG, entrusted with mounting a robust defense, faltered in organizing an effective fortification and seemed to have surrendered prematurely. Anyway, on that Friday, July 22nd, 1994, by 3 p.m., the situation had sufficiently stabilized, allowing me to make a reassuring call to my concerned wife, my mother, and my sister. Like many in the country, they had been following reports of the military operation throughout the morning, assuming it was the publicly announced exercise involving the Americans. My mother, in her customary fashion, expressed more worries about whether I had the protective juju she always obtained from various marabouts for me. She knew very well that I never carried any of those talismans. At the radio station, the Gambian National Army corporal from the Motor Transport Unit of Yundum arrived in a white pickup truck, conspicuously lacking a registration number plate. While I initially believed he was acting on orders from the superior officer, it became apparent that he had acted independently. Yes, hailing from Yundum Barracks and having passed through Fajara Barracks en route to the corporal's appearance provided an opportunity for me to navigate the terrain beyond the radio station and to clear the doubts bothering me. With soldiers remaining stationed at the radio station, I accompanied the corporal to gather more information about the unfolding events. The Fajara Barracks revealed an unsettling scene of confusion and disorder, lacking clear officer leadership. Overhearing hushed conversations among the soldiers speculating about my allegiance, I feigned not to hear them. Despite this, I sensed a unanimous agreement among them that I was part of the rebellion. The driver or corporal proceeded to refuel the truck at the TSG fuel supply station within the barracks, then generously offered to drive me to Yundum Barracks, approximately 17 miles away. However, as we prepared to depart, Captain Mamadi Sane suddenly emerged, his handgun still within reach. My immediate assumption was that he was there to question my activities following our earlier bridge confrontation. But to my surprise, his attitude had changed, marked by genuine friendliness and a jubilant tone reflecting the success of the operation. Curious about the State House Guard's surrender, I inquired further. Captain Sane exuded a sense of pride as he recounted. Captain Sarr, we presented them with a choice: surrender or face death. Consequently, they relinquished their arms. In truth, the situation had unfolded differently than his portrayal. I was eager to learn from him about the origins and participants of the rebellion, yet he only seemed focused on critiquing the ineffectiveness of the presidential guards stationed at the State House. We embarked on the journey to the Yundum barracks together, driving from Bakau through the bustling streets of Latrikunda, Kanifing, Serekunda, and finally arriving at Churchillstown. Though the streets held a sparse military presence, the residents we passed by greeted us with exuberance, a clear indication that the news of the day's events had spread. Captain Sane's excitement was noticeable as he energetically waved his handgun towards the small but jubilant crowds lining the streets. Our arrival at Yundum Barracks occurred around 4 p.m. The camp appeared to be in a somewhat more organized state. 2 officers took charge: Captain Mamadiba, commander of C Company, and Lieutenant Sekuba Bari, overseeing the motor transport unit. Inside the office of the deputy commander of the battalion, Major Jackson, whom I was told was detained, I encountered the director of the National Security Service, Mr. Kemo Sise, and the permanent secretary, Ministry of Defense, Mr. Solmam Janha. Both men were visibly anxious and had personally implored me to secure their release. I came to learn that they had been apprehended in Banjul and subsequently brought to the camp for detention. The identity of those responsible for their arrest and transfer remain a mystery. Please, Captain, help us, pleaded Mr. Janha, my boss or superior administrative defense, his voice tinged with nervousness. I will do my best, I assured him, emphasizing once again, however, that I have no involvement in the coup. I aim to convey this message to Mr. Janha to solidify my innocence amidst the turmoil. Even earlier that morning at the Vice President's office, I had sensed an air of skepticism emanating from him. I had hoped that by now he would have acknowledged my total innocence. Yet, his current priority seems solely focused on departing the barracks and returning home. I empathize with his apprehension, as the camp was now permeated with gun-wielding soldiers engaged in actions that defied comprehension and civility. Likewise, I found myself unable to reconcile the ongoing activities within the camp. My attempts to extract information from the officers regarding the coup's ringleaders proved futile. It became evident that Captain Sane held no significant role in orchestrating the coup, and he appeared either disoriented by the evolving situation or genuinely was unaware of the appropriate course of action. Captain Ba, in charge of C Company, seemed similarly detached from any authoritative role. Lieutenant Sekuba Bari at least displayed remarkable control over the chaotic situation. Upon seeing me unarmed, he promptly instructed a soldier to retrieve an AK-47 rifle from the armory for me, demonstrating his quick decision making role. Yet, when I inquired about the coup's leaders, he remained evasive, hinting at his critical role in the operation's success that morning. He elaborated further. The dispatch of vehicles and soldiers was orchestrated under my directives. Wiring the vehicles, whose keys were confiscated by the Nigerians, was crucial to ensure movement out of the camp. Lieutenant Barry bore a myriad of juju charms adorning all over his body. Unlike Captain Sane and Ba, he exuded a remarkable self-assuredness. I therefore shared with him the little I recently read about the fluidity of military takeovers in their initial stages and more. In that paper, it was emphasized that the fluid nature of coups and the urgency of establishing a new government to replace the ousted one was critical. He readily embraced my suggestion to deliver a concise address via the Banjul area's radio stations, informing the Gambian populace that the PPP government had been dissolved, with the GNA assuming governance. Furthermore, all political activities were to be temporarily suspended and international borders sealed until further notice. Concerning the Constitution, we agreed to await the formal government's formation before addressing its fate publicly. The three officers tasked me with drafting the speech. Though uncertain of my political speech writing abilities, I accepted the challenge. Meanwhile, I still remain in the dark about the coup's leaders and motivations. Notable absent were the Nigerian battalion commander and the rest of the Nigerian Army training team officers, while a handful of defiant GNA officers were incarcerated in the camp cell. Major Chris Jackson, the battalion second in command, and Lieutenant Moro Mendy, the adjutant, were among those detained in the cells. I approached Lieutenant Mendy's cell window, where he protested about his unjust confinement. Regrettably, I lacked the authority to determine his fate. Ironically, it was Moro Mendy and Staff Sergeant Jibusen who had refuted any knowledge of the coup and even questioned its possibility. Mendy, the adjutant responsible for barracks administration, was now an unwitting victim of the coup's repercussions. However, in a similar vein to the concerning situation involving Commander Dada and Colonel Akoji, appointing a GNA engineering officer to become second in command of the 1st Infantry Battalion and another to one of its respective companies, it was equally unimaginable that they deviated from the established procedure by appointing a relatively junior officer like Lieutenant Moro Mendy to the position of battalion adjutant. This role had historically been reserved exclusively for senior captains, very senior captains, since its inception by the British Army training team 7 years ago. Could this deviation have been a factor contributing to Lieutenant Moro Mendy, the battalion adjutant, being unaware of the clandestine activities of the coup conspirators operating right under his nose within the barracks he was in charge of? One can only speculate. When I questioned the two company commanders and the officer in charge of the motor transport unit, that is Captain Sane, Captain Ba, and Lieutenant Barry, about the fate of the officers under detention, none could provide insight or guidance on securing their release. Later, it came as a shock to discover that the fate of the detained officers rested in the hands of an unexpected figure, Sergeant Major Rahim Baji. Locating him at C Company headquarters, I inquired about the officers and civilians' arrest and detention within the camp. He clarified that the order originated from the officers in the field, distinct from those stationed at the barracks. For an NCO to assume command of a military camp in the presence of captains and lieutenants foreshadowed the impending crisis. It served as an early indication of the imminent problems of a breakthrough coup d'etat. Although Lieutenant Barry had initially conveyed the importance of his involvement in the morning's operation, it became increasingly evident that there were higher-ranking figures exerting authority beyond him and the other officers within the camp. However, I proceeded to the adjutant's office, retrieved pen and paper, and crafted a concise speech. But suddenly, Lieutenant Barrow and Captain Sane departed the camp without informing Captain Ba or me of their destination. Soon after their departure, a message arrived at the camp directing all GNA officers to convene at the State House for a special meeting. The source of the message remained undisclosed. The camp became a hub of activities with various vehicles commandeered from civilian owners in the streets. Sergeant Boob, driving a commercial minibus, was ready to transport Captain Ba and I to the meeting in Banjul. Amazingly, Sergeant Boob was self-promoted to the rank of a second lieutenant, donning the corresponding insignia on his shoulders, another emblematic sign of the crisis of the coup. Whenever you are prepared, sir, I am at your service, the sergeant informed us. But I decided to conduct one last tour of the camp with the particular urge to converse face-to-face with Sergeant Major Jibusen after being informed that he was around the guard room. It will be recalled that on Monday, 18th of July, 4 days ago, I had contacted him from my office to inquire about the validity of the coup rumors, and he totally dismissed it. Based on our discussions with those I had earlier spoken to, or let me read that again. Based on discussions with those I had earlier spoken to, it became clear that Sain had orchestrated the assembly and distribution of the heavy weaponry to the mutineers that morning. I found Sergeant Major Sain, near the guard room. Despite the changing circumstances, he remained the same respectful individual I had known. He executed a crisp salute before elaborating on his situation. Sir, he began, I was entirely unaware of the coup or anyone associated with it when you inquired about it on Monday. It was only this morning that I learned about it. And at first, I resisted joining their cause. He recounted his arrest and subsequent confinement, after which he was presented with an obvious choice: cooperate or face dire consequences. That's when I decided to join them, sir. And indeed, If I hadn't assembled the heavy weapons, no one else would have been able to do it. A sense of excitement and pride emanated from him, having accomplished a feat that seemed insurmountable among the camp's officers. I explained to him the invitation we just received for all officers to convene at the State House where I was heading to. He offered me his best wishes, saluted me once more, and strode away with his imposing height. Little did I know that he would soon meet his death when the wave of violence was unleashed. Sergeant Boo drove us out of the camp towards Banjul for the meeting. But as we approached the vicinity of Churchillstown, the voice of Lieutenant Sekuba Bari echoed through the private FM1 radio station on the vehicle's transistor. Fellow Gambians, fellow countrymen, the patriotic armed forces of the Gambia are in full control of the destiny of this nation, and a bloodless coup has been executed. A curfew will be in effect from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. You are required to remain within your homes. The PPP regime is hereby dissolved, and former ministers must report to the nearest police station for their own safety. The Constitution is suspended, and all political parties are prohibited. The airport, seaport, and land borders are sealed. These actions are not aimed at any foreign government, and all nationals within the Gambia are advised to stay home for their own well-being. An Armed Forces Provisional Council is established, and its members will be unveiled later. This momentous sacrifice has been undertaken due to the rampant corruption and subversive activities under the PPP regime over the past 3 decades. A new era of freedom, progress, and accountability will define the governance. Any attempt to thwart this patriotic initiative by the Gambia National Army will be met with unrelenting force. Long live the Republic of the Gambia. Captain Sane proceeded to convey the translated version in Mandinka first, followed by a clumsy spoken Wolof. While some of his remarks echoed the discussions we had at Yundum Barracks, the overall message diverged considerably from the paper I drafted. Yet still, the true origin and decision makers behind the announcement remain a mystery to me. Captain Ba was equally uncertain and couldn't provide any insights. Approximately 7 miles before reaching Banjo, we encountered Second Lieutenant Kending Singate and Second Lieutenant Keba Topper, both armed with rifles like everyone else. They flagged down our minivan and inquired about our destination. We are headed to Banjul, I responded. Why? He queried. For the officers' meeting, I answered. Second Lieutenant Singate appeared utterly bewildered, his words and actions devoid of any semblance of logic. He avoided meeting our gaze, displaying nervousness as he mumbled incoherent statements while pacing back and forth. The idea of Kending Singate leading a coup seemed unfathomable. I struggled to envision what the second lieutenant could possibly accomplish in a senior government role. The exact moment of Second Lieutenant Kending Singate's entry into the 10-year-old Gambia National Army eluded me, but my earliest memory of encountering him within the army dated back to 1990. The same year, I underwent a court-martial and subsequent demotion. Singate at that time served as a clerk in the Lone Army Office. Occupying the rank of Lance Corporal, he held the lowest position within the hierarchy of the non-commissioned officers. During my court-martial proceedings, a time when trepidation permeated the ranks and officers hesitated to testify as witnesses against the commander's prosecution team, a young and seemingly unassuming Singate stood out by adhering to the truth as he perceived it. Despite facing subsequent repercussions, his stance remained unaltered. I later learned of his commission as an officer cadet, followed by attendance of the usual basic officer training course in the United States. Upon his return, Singate assumed the role of platoon commander for the battalion stationed in Farafenye. His leadership extended to commanding the infantry platoon based at Kudankam. During one fateful hunting expedition with his troops, an unfortunate incident occurred. A soldier inadvertently discharged a rifle, resulting in the unintended death of the platoon sergeant of the platoon. Colonel Jim Sarr, then the British Army training team commander, advocated for Singate's court-martial and punishment, citing an authorized and unauthorized hunting trip involving live ammunition, which was meant exclusively for military operations. An investigative committee was convened to delve into the matter, revealing that Gambian National Army commander had, in fact, authorized hunting excursions at the camp years before, during the tenure of other officers. This recreational activity had been introduced to alleviate the burden that officers had complained about, and its authorization predates Singate's posting as well as Colonel Jim Sarr's assumption of command. While this departure from protocol was inherently unacceptable within the military establishment, the context illuminated a more complex narrative. Hence, the young platoon commander escaped any punishment for the crime. Notwithstanding, about a month ago, or before the coup d'etat, Singate encountered another predicament involving the State House Guards at the Gambia's sole golf course, a place where President Jawla frequently played when he was not on his obsessive international travels. Singate's duties led him to provide food to the guards stationed at the Nigerian commander's residence, situation opposite the golf course where the president was playing. On that particular occasion, the presidential guards denied him his customary route, triggering a confrontation. An intense argument ensued, almost escalating to physical altercation, resulting in a spectacle that angered many of the president's followers. The politicians, upon becoming involved, demanded severe punishment for Singate's misconduct. However, just as the Nigerians were considering how best to administer this punishment, their command problem arose, leading to a suspension of Singate's case. They hoped that once the new NATA commander, Colonel Guadebe, had replaced General Dada, his case would be addressed. That was barely a month ago. However, today, July 22nd, 1994, Second Lieutenant Kending Singate was armed and moving throughout the urban area, apparently attempting to overthrow the PPP government. Despite the tense circumstances, I personally didn't yet perceive him as a threat, even with a firearm in hand. In my capacity as a senior officer overseeing Second Lieutenant Kending Singate, I consistently regarded him as an upright young officer, a man of few words, making him quite affable. Being a devout Muslim, he faithfully observed prayers in the camp and diligently performed his duties. Additionally, he was known for his fondness for action novels. He was more than just a subordinate to me. He was like a younger brother and a cherished friend long before the coup. However, in the aftermath of the coup and the sudden acquisition of power, he sadly underwent a significant transformation. Over the course of 6 months, he evolved into a disturbingly aggressive figure, abusing his authority and position. This dark shift ultimately led to his downfall. As for Second Lieutenant Keba Topper, a former TSG officer now working closely with Singate, my knowledge of his background was limited, as he had only joined the Gambian National Army about a year ago. Reviewing his life one day at the ministry, his file rather, at the ministry, I learned that his foreign training had been postponed due to hypertension, a condition the Nigerian military doctor within the Gambian National Army was treating, with the possibility of sending him to Nigeria for training. In my casual encounters with him, I found him to carry himself with the comportment of a respectable officer. With the situation remaining calm, devoid of any looting or civil disobedience, I somehow found solace in the presence of Singate and Topper patrolling the streets alongside numerous soldiers, effectively upholding law and order. Folks, it's been 42 minutes plus, and here I end chapter 4. I will be back next week to read chapter 5. I wish you a happy weekend and Juma Mubarak to all of you.